Time's up, Admiral.
Here it comes.
Chevron 1, coded.
For my ally is the Force, and the powerful ally it is. Life creates it, makes it grow.
You failed your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Cry hammer, and let's set the dogs of war.
Chevron 2 is coded.
Conan, what is best in life? Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, to hear the lamentation of your women.
It's all in the reflexes.
Well, also said you're heavy into martial arts, Tai Chi and all that killer stuff. I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
Chevron 3 encoded.
And somebody ought to belt you in the mouth. But I won't. I won't. The hell I will.
Chevron 4 encoded.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Chevron 5 encoded.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Chevron 6 encoded.
Not for while you can, monk boy.
Great Scott. Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
You shall not pass! I thought I'd die fighting side by side with an elf.
What about side by side with a friend?
A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day.
Chevron 7 is locked.
Ah, crap. I forgot to fix the picture all the way to the end. It's always something, isn't it?
It's okay. You have the excuse of brain damage from this week's Doctor Who episode.
Actually, yes, I did watch it before I did that. So,
Yeah.
But I didn't get brain damage from this movie. So,
No,
I didn't get brain damage from this movie. Hail and howdy, everybody. Welcome to Saturday Night Drive-In, where I run a tight shit. I really do.
a tight shit, huh?
Shit. I said shit.
You said shit.
All right, we're gonna have to do the replay on that later. Anyway, how we doing, everybody? We hope you had a good weekend so far, because it's time in that moment to take a break from the literal nonsense of the world, whether it's entertainment or the actual real life crap going on, and just sit back and try and relax and enjoy a good discussion about movies. And that's what we tend to do here. We like to have good discussions, and it will be a good discussion tonight. There's no anger or animosity built into any of the discussion tonight, because we have a good movie tonight. I'll say that. It's a good movie, The King's Speech. Before we get into that, Jed, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. I always appreciate doing these shows because they help me keep a balance between good entertainment and bad entertainment. And so I always need it. But I'm excited to be here. The King's Speech is a movie that I love and I haven't seen in a few years. So I'm excited to talk about it with someone who's never seen it before. I didn't know anything about it.
Oh, I knew the history. I just didn't know.
At least the movie itself. But this
Yeah.
is kind of an interesting inverse for us because 9 times out of 10, I haven't seen the movie we're discussing prior to the show. And he has many times when it was released in the 80s or the 60s. But it is a nice change of pace.
Yeah, this is one of those movies that when it came out, I just wasn't interested. Not because of any real reason, just because while it is a historical movie and it takes place during one of the most fascinating points in modern history, I just simply wasn't interested. So I just was okay, not gonna pay attention to it. For no reason other than that. So to watch it today, and I think you'll find a couple of my points interesting onto when I was most interested in the movie, when I was most engaged. I think it'll make sense why I say I was most engaged at that point. But before we get into it, hail and howdy to the chat across all our channels. We hope you guys are going to have a good night. Remember to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. So we hope you enjoy the rest of the show. For those who are new here, unless there's a general direct question about something, we tend to just discuss the movie and not so much interact with the chat. I feel the need to make that statement on some of the shows that we're doing a lot lately because they're generally discussion-based shows, and unless something happens where we need to talk to you guys really, really want to get a point across, we tend to just hash the discussion out between ourselves. But we are here. We are always looking at the chat, so no, we are seeing what you guys are saying. And we appreciate all of you joining us this afternoon into the evening. And if you're watching on the replay. So anyway, all right. So The King's Speech. Jed, set us up. What are we doing here?
Well, this was a 2010 film, which I didn't realize until watching it. It was actually nominated for a ton of Oscars and won several of them as well. I considered this more a cult classic. Like everyone I talked to.
No, this was a big deal in 2010. It was a big deal.
I was not aware that most people I talked to have never even heard of it, but the few people who have seen it love it. So I always considered this a cult classic, but no, it definitely appears to be a big story. So it follows the future King George in his life leading up to a big speech announcing World War II, basically, or at least England's involvement in World War II as he overcomes his stutter. So it's all about this future king. He doesn't realize he's going to be the king because he's like second in line, building up to becoming the king, fighting a speech impediment. And it's just so much drama. It's
a character piece. This movie
100%.
is it's a complete character piece dealing with real historical figures. But let's talk about the title right away. That's where I want to start here. I think it has a double meaning. I believe it has, at least from my perspective, has a double meaning. I may be just trying to be too artsy fartsy about this, but
I would agree.
Of course, there is the King's Speech that King George VI gave when Britain declared war on Germany to really officially kick off World War II. But I think it also is a second meaning of his speech, as in speech in terms of it being able to speak. And therefore, I think that's the double meaning because, listen, before getting into this movie, I thought the whole movie was focusing around that one moment in time. I didn't realize this took place essentially almost over a decade, like over 8-9 years. I had no idea that it was basically while he was still second in line to the throne before his brother abdicated and all that stuff. Now I'm familiar with the history. As a World War II buff, I'm very familiar with all this stuff. So I was intrigued to say, okay, so we're going way back to before he's actually king, and it's going to be a character study. And I am always fascinated by stuff because you can't quite see it on my shelf, but it is right there. You can see I have the complete series of Downton Abbey, which takes place,
nerd.
Before this happens. I'm not a nerd. It's culture. It's culture. It's great. It's good culture. Anyway, but it takes place before that. So I'm familiar with, of course, the British aristocracy. I've seen a lot of previous other material over the years, movies, stuff like that. So I'm familiar with all the lead up to these things. And to find out that it is taking place over this time, and it's not just a look into regular aristocracy, but now we're going to go into the actual royal family, the House of Windsor, and get a good look at their dysfunction. Not just looking at it from other aristocracy, watching that dysfunction on the outside, as you see a little bit of it in Downton Abbey, but seeing it inside and realize they do a good job of portraying that that while these are the tippy top, one of the richest families in the world, still are, that their dysfunction is as real as anybody else's dysfunction. An overbearing father, a brother who doesn't care about the honor of the family or upholding that station, which is so important to a nation. And then another who, because of let's just say mental abuse, even some physical abuse, because we learned that the nanny abused him. And I'm gonna count some of this as accurate because I don't want to think they did this movie without doing the proper research and not getting that in there. So to have suffered some level of abuse and to develop this speech impediment, which the movie makes clear that when it starts at age 4 or 5, you weren't always like that. And things happen to make you behave in such a manner. So there's a nice little psychological aspect to this movie, which I found interesting as well, because I'm always interested to see, not super deep, but dealing with the human psyche, or at least
Mhm.
human nature of these things. So,
Well, I would consider that one of the most important parts of the film because not only was this a big family where being able to talk was important, where it's very public facing, so having a speech impediment was terrible, but the psychological aspect of it was still widely considered taboo by society at that point. That's why they kept pushing back against the doctor when he kept trying to ask questions about. At the time, they were calling him Bertie most of the movie,
mhm.
King George, about his childhood, about his personal life. They were pushing back on that because they're like, no, we just want the physical problem with this. We want to just address the physiology of a speech impediment, which of course there are stuff that goes into that, especially
Mhm.
after years and decades of doing it. Your mouth's going to be weak in certain ways, but it was all about the psychology. And that's what the root of the problem was. So that's what needed to be
Yep.
addressed more than anything else. And it was a struggle for both of them to just accept psychology as a viable solution to this.
And let's remember, this is England. They're not exactly the most upfront as a
The
culture,
stiff upper lip.
with, being overly emotional in public, with sharing. I mean,
Carry
I'm,
on.
I'm not being over. I'm not being hyperbolic here. That is it's an English trait. No, let's not air our dirty laundry for all to see, and it's especially a thing when you're dealing with aristocracy and royals. Let's even, because it was interesting as part of the movie to say, "Oh, we wish that uh I forget Davy, the previous brother. I forget all their names prior to their elevation uh to the throne."
Yeah. Since they
Uh
all changed their names.
yeah, yeah. I think it was Davy when he says they wish. Oh, I wish it was just going to be a mistress. See, they can handle mistresses. That's been going on for thousands of years.
The French
Mi-
perfected it though.
Yeah, there's mistresses. Hey, it's fine. We can accept that. Everybody can kind of just turn a blind eye to that. But divorce, we may not be Catholics anymore, but divorce is still not good. They still don't want it because
Well,
it's a
they are the
stain.
head of a
Yeah,
church
yeah,
at the
exactly.
time that they're head of the Church of England, which is
Yeah,
a big, I don't know if they still are, but that's a pretty
I
big
think
deal.
so. I
Are
think
they?
so because I mean, what I think the Archbishop of Canterbury is the top of the Church of England in terms of
Mm,
the clergy,
you're right.
and after that, the royal family is still head of church and state.
Hmm.
And because remember, of course, thank you, Stephen J.
Okay.
Goodman. Yeah, thank you. Yep, yeah, because the royal family, because English, there's head of government and head of country. The royal family is head of head of state, and the parliament, the prime minister, is head of government. That's how they divide it, and
Hmm.
they each serve their different functions. So they
Hmm.
still serve as Stephen just pointing out, they still serve as head of
Yeah.
church. So it's a
Well,
big deal. Big deal.
the comparison I really like to make, especially with the brother storyline that you're referring to, is how much it's drawn for is a parallel to King Henry VIII,
Hmm.
and how it's still centuries between them, a good 400 years between the two rulers, the two monarchs, but they're still dealing with the same things. And King Henry VIII is the one who led towards the creation of the Church of England, separating from the Catholic Church and making divorce a thing because he wanted his son so badly. He just
And
marrying
then
every woman he could get
and
his
then
hands on.
ended up with Liz the First. That was the end of the Plantagenet too. That's to me, that's one of the most fascinating things. That for all his efforts, it's his line still ended with Elizabeth because the
Hmm.
Plantagenet was done. And I forget. I think it was a couple more lines before the House of Windsor took over, and now the House of Windsor is going to be there forever. They're not going anywhere. But yeah. So that is
I just
fascinating.
love historical parallels, and yeah,
Yeah.
of course, things have evolved since they are the actual Church of England now versus
Mhm.
Catholicism. But divorce being such a big deal after that many centuries, this close to us, like of course, divorce is a prominent part of our society, but they're still sequestered. They're still separate from society.
Mhm.
Even today, I imagine divorce would be a big deal. I mean, you know how much Harry and Meghan were a big deal, and of course,
Yeah.
it's not divorce, but just how ordinary that would be in a normal family,
Yeah.
but to them, that's the end of the world.
Exactly. And it's fat. That's why when I watch these period pieces, I enjoy. Let's be honest. When we deal with period pieces like this, the aristocracy is always involved to some level. That's why it makes these period pieces usually a focus because there's always nobility involved in the story somehow, and it's always interesting to see how we're gonna be treated to them. And in this case, it's not so much a court a problem at court, or there's kind of trickery or subterfuge going on, or all that kind of stuff. No, this was a family thing, because as I said, at this point, the House of Windsor, they're firmly in place. They're firmly in place, because even with and of course because with Bertie taking over, the fact that his eldest child is a woman, Elizabeth II, who would go on to be the youngest queen ever and would rule for 80 freaking years, longest rule ever. Having a female heir wasn't a big deal anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were able to, in terms of accepting moving the family line down. Their biggest problem was scandal, and as you just said, the scandal isn't so much you're marrying a certain person; it's like you're marrying somebody who is divorced and has
Right.
it has a history. I mean, even they said we don't care that they didn't even care she was American. The only
Yeah.
thing they cared about was that she was divorced, and even when they were together, before they officially got together, she wasn't exactly faithful to him either.
Mm.
He still
There's that, and I imagine that'll be a good excuse. But
Yeah.
I always figured that once people saw them together, there were
Mhm.
bigger concerns at play, and the divorce nature
Mhm.
of her past lives was a very good excuse. But you see them; he's his whipping boy, at least in the
Mhm.
film. Like, she has no respect for his title, ordering
Mhm.
him around. Clearly, she's wearing the pants in the relationship, and
Yeah.
that's not always a bad thing. I think it's weird. That's an off
Now,
balance of power, but he's going to be the monarch at that point. You can't be
historically, he was always a gallivanter. He was
Mhm.
always choosing women of ill repute or not of station. So there had already been a history from 20 years on that Davy was gonna do what he wanted to do despite scandal. He didn't care. He really, but even though that's a thing, he was just as it pointed out. I mean, Bertie said, "I was never meant to be a king." Neither was Davy, because he never wanted it, and he did everything possible to thumb his nose at it. And it's fast. That's the fascinating stuff when you look at this thing. But I want to change track a little bit now, and just say, for the fact that this is for all that it is, and it's a well structured movie. The pacing is good. Although later on, I want to talk about the camera direction. They chose some really interesting
Mhm.
camera choices
I
at
love the
times.
cinematography of this film.
Really interesting, because it changes. It show there. We'll talk about it now. Talk about it now. There's certain points in the movie. It's regular, full scene, everybody around. But then at times, it'll suddenly cut, a rapid, sudden cut to full on POV at times, and certain, not just straight up, but certain angles and this and that, and it, without any track. And while the soundtrack, the score is pleasant, it's sort of just part of the scene. It's not really
Yeah,
there to elevate anything.
I would agree.
These camera choices, this camera direction, the cinematography, without any sound, it changes the feeling of the scene. And to me, that's a very strong accomplishment right there, where a sudden shift makes you think, "Oh, I'm suddenly feeling different about this scene right now. I'm not. I was kind of casual, and now I'm very focused and I'm very in tune to what's being going on here when we're shifting back and forth, or we're right in somebody's face." So I found that very interesting in terms of cinematography. You want?
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
agree.
yeah.
Just especially the conversations between Bertie and his speech therapist. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but the private scenes between
Lionel.
Jeffrey Rush and Colin Firth, they're just really
Mhm.
good. And like the way it's framed. And one of my favorite ones is how they use props in such a great way, like covering up his mouth at certain points.
Yeah.
So you're inside, like at the very beginning of the film when Lionel records the prince speaking into the microphone
Mhm.
with the music blaring really loud. We're in a POV shot of sorts
Mhm.
where we can't see his mouth, so we think, oh, the prince probably sounded terrible, just like he thinks he sounded terrible. So there's just so many dynamic ways that they use the scenery of that awful, dingy little room.
Yeah. 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 And since you brought it up, let's go in this track next. This is a fantastic cast.
Mhm.
If anything, I think the best thing about this movie is the casting. Jeffrey Rush is outstanding as Lionel. Colin Firth was outstanding as Birdie. Helena Bonham Carter is always a pleasure in every movie. And then you see a sprinkling of other storied British actors throughout this whole movie.
There's a ton of Doctor Who actors.
Yes,
in
there
this.
are. Yes, I knew you would see that.
Oh, I was kept saying like, oh yep, that's the concierge from Voyage of the Damned. Oh, that guy, he was the alien in the cowboy episode with Matt Smith. Like, A Town Called Mercy.
Well, that just speaks to good old Who. When it was good, they got quality casting back then, and this was one of those movies where at that moment in time, this is some of the tip top of British acting. And I don't have a single problem with any of the performances in this movie. Everybody nails it. I mean, even what's his name? Who played Davy? Fuck, I just forgot his name.
Played Davy. That would be Guy Pearce. Yes.
Guy Pearce. Thank you. Even Guy Pearce, who I'm not generally a fan of, nailed it. Everybody nailed every aspect of the movie. So that's a lot for me in the score, because I will admit it. While I like this movie, it's a good movie. Because it's such a hyper-focused small point in this historical moments going on. As I said, it's one of the reasons I never went to watch it in the first place. And while I've seen it, I don't regret seeing it. I'm not exactly going to go back and revisit this movie.
Really?
But no, yeah, because I would have been more interested in watching them deal with stuff during the war, because to me, I became the most interested when World War II began, and we're leading up to the big speech, the other half of the
you
title,
just had different interests in the history.
Yeah.
I can understand that, but that's not what it's about. So I think they would have lost the plot if they focused on the war.
Obviously, because that's where my interest gets piqued, when I want to see the world. I want to see characters interacting with the major events of the world, and 85% of this movie is focused on the internal of these characters. They're focusing on the internal aspects, and history. While history is moving along beside them, there's still a lot of the major events aren't until the abdication and the beginning of war. Everything else is just basically self-improvement and self-exploration, and trying to find out what is can you fix something like this, and can somebody of high station really communicate, and I say that knowing what I'm saying, with somebody of common station. Especially one of the most interesting interactions is the fact that when Birdie goes to see Lionel never pretends he's anything but what he is.
No, he even specifically says, "I'd rather not call me doctor." Like, he doesn't want to keep up the pretense of being the doctor, but he's not going to directly contradict any of his credentials. And I think Jeffrey Rush just had a great time playing this role. It's a perfect role for him. Very Shakespearean.
He just gobbled up this whole movie. And Colin Firth, man, he gets a lot of props for basically creating the stammer. And the frustration.
It's not easy to be consistent with it, but it was very much the same stammer the whole time.
Because when he would pause and swallow the word and not be serious, I could feel it. His emote was subtle and perfect. And I really, that's why I say the performances are outstanding in this movie. They really committed to it. And that's why a movie like this deserves the praise it gets. And I'm saying that's my objectivity stepping in. While subjectively, I don't dislike the fact that I had to watch this, I'm never going to go back to this. I'm not going to put it on my shelf, but I appreciate that it was a brilliantly performed movie. And that the cast they gave it their all. Jeffrey Rush and Colin Firth put everything into this, because it is their history as their culture. And I would think they have some level of respect for it, because this is also, I mean, you and I, we're Yankees. We're Americans. The idea of having so much appreciation for noble and royal family is a little foreign to us. At least it is to me. I understand it, but I don't completely connect to it. But this is the Britain, the United Kingdom, for the most part. over the centuries, the couple thousand years, not what, well, yeah, yeah. If you go back and over 1,000 years, because
Yeah,
it's not
over
until
1,000 years.
yeah.
Couple
I mean, I
thousand
know
is
the
stretch.
history. Yeah, I mean, I want to say there were always kingdoms there. There were always
Yeah.
kingdoms.
But just how they were
It's not
classified has
until
changed so many times with all the invasions.
it's not until the 800s when after the Great Heathen Army just ran ramshod over England that then they unified around Wessex, and then it was still a little bit longer before England was formed. But even back then, there was always an affinity for the royal family, and even after Parliament and the royal family were separated and each serving a different function for the country, the society, the people retained an affinity, an affection
Mhm.
for their royals. And that's why I think that their performances are meaningful because they don't want that lost. They want to show the respect they have, the affection they have. And I appreciate seeing that. And that's how I feel it goes through it. It goes through the whole thing. Because whenever somebody sees, whenever a normie, whenever a commoner realizes the presence of the noble house, oh, Majesty, they for a second, it's like, how do I act? I'm awestruck. What do I do when Lionel's wife realizes that the queen is sitting in her dining room, the newly crowned queen,
She
and
does a
that
great job in that scene, but
yeah,
so does Helen Bonham Carter. Like,
oh,
oh, that's so sweet, but we've got previous engagement. Just the way
that's
she's.
that's total British right there. It's like, oh, I'm going to deny you in the sweetest possible, most well-mannered way so that nobody's offended and
Yeah,
everybody
well,
feels
because
as
they
though
don't
they're not.
actually want them to
No,
stay. She
no,
does not want the king and queen of England to judge her cooking.
yeah, but that's British behavior.
Mhm.
Nobody wants this, but each side will go out of their way to be as polite as
Mhm.
possible to just get out of it.
Well, except for Lionel, he is fully willing to be
Oh,
disrespectful when it helps his
mhm,
patients. Like I love like we're talking about subtleties and performances.
yeah,
When he first meets Birdie, he's visibly shaking. He's very
yeah,
nervous, stumbling over his words a little bit, still trying to show respect, but he's
mhm,
still going to do what he needs to do. If he's going to help his patient, he's going to help his patient.
yeah.
He's not going to back down from his positions, even though he's nervous as hell. And it's all in just small body language from Jeffrey Rush. I know a
Mhm.
lot of people praise Colin in this film, and rightfully so. He deserved the Oscar, no question in my mind. But I always had more of an affinity towards Jeffrey Rush's
Oh,
performance
Jeffrey
in this
Rush is
film.
the best thing in this movie. After
Mhm.
I think a subtly brilliant performance by Helena Bonham Carter. I
She's
love
not in
her,
it very much. She does a great
but
job,
she
but
steals every scene she's in.
mm.
Every scene she's in, she nails it.
Oh,
And
I love when she just like, what if my husband were the Prince of York or the Duke of York? Just how
uh,
subtly she dropped that.
yeah, it's great. And that scene you just repeated when she's sitting at the table. Oh, hello, you may call me ma'am. And I love how she wants the proper etiquette,
Hmm.
and the wife is perfectly happy to go along with it. And it's great exchanges, and that is the fantastic acting, the performances of
And the writing, just
yeah.
the subtlety of the dialogue. This is a very
Mhm.
dialogue heavy movie.
Oh yeah,
There's nothing but dialogue in this
it's
film,
oh yeah,
really.
it's all character interactions,
Mhm.
every little bit of it.
And
Yeah,
it's so subtle in all ways. Like it's a great near perfect script working with near perfect actors and
yeah.
performances.
It's there. I honestly, I don't really have any real criticisms of this movie per se, outside of my own subjective criticisms
Yeah,
of how I'm interested in interacting with period pieces.
personal
I mean,
preferences.
I feel, honestly, most I could say is maybe they could have shaved 10-15 minutes off because it is almost 2 hours. It
I would
does
agree.
it does drag on in a little bit in the middle. They could have maybe cut out a few of the interpersonal reactions of the royal family because we got a lot of it already throughout most of it. We didn't quite need a few things, but like not one entire segments, just maybe 2 minutes here, 3 minutes there, another 4 minutes here, and shaved it down as close as you could to maybe an hour and a half because I feel it was pushing it to be basically 2 hours. And once I realized where we were in the timeline, watching things happen and realizing, oh, okay, the abdication's coming soon. Because as soon as I see a date, my internal index is going, okay, going through historical moments. Here we are. We're getting close to it. Here we are. This, that. When is this person going to leave?
Mm.
What's going to happen? Oh, when I hear Herr Hitler, here we go. Now things we got
I didn't know
all the
any of that.
all these things are falling into place, and that as a history buff. Oh, I'm frozen.
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
frozen.
Oh, yeah, you did just freeze. It
Yeah, I'm
looks
frozen.
great, though.
Yeah,
Memers, grab it before he turns off his camera.
They can go back and get it later. Let's see if I'm nope. Probably gonna have to go out and come back in again. This happened last time
All right.
when I froze. All right, I'll be right back. So
All right.
say a piece. I'll be right back.
All right. Well, yeah, like he's saying, the history is very fascinating. World War II is not something that I've studied extensively. If this were a film set in the Revolutionary War, I feel like I would be experiencing things in a similar way. I adore the Revolutionary War and the history surrounding it. But this film, it's just so well put together that I do agree that it is a little bit too long, but I'm so very invested that it doesn't matter to me. I understand that perspective. Rachel watched it with me for the first time and she was starting to fall asleep at a certain point, which I understand, but I'm so enthralled that I can accept that flaw in it. And that's a personal thing that's very subjective, but looking good.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, we're good now. That's weird. That happened last week too. Anyway, I have no idea what you just said, so I can't. I have no idea where to go.
I was just agreeing that it could be shaved down a little bit. I recognize that as I'm just so invested that I don't care, but that's subjective. I recognize objectively it is bloated in a couple areas, but
yeah, and that's just I'm hypersensitive to movies being too long now. From us doing the show for the past couple of years, also in general now, when we have to watch garbage shit, I'm like, wow, this has been way too long. Why can't we get through this faster? But back to the historical moments, because I think there's no point in going through each step of this movie aside from maybe discussing the character interactions. What I really do enjoy is the whole idea of, despite all the power and all the, I guess, comfort that is provided to a royal, aside from his family, and I really do appreciate the affection they have of Bertie showing affection to his family. That in his little section there, we see he didn't have a good relationship with his father, has a terrible relationship with his brother, his mother's is the Queen Mother is a
it
standard
is the most British
hands
relationship
off.
ever.
Yeah, hands off. Because even when Davy hugged her, she was like this. What do I do?
He was
what do I do?
not okay with it.
But Bertie, affectionate with his wife, affectionate with his children. And I do have to say,
one of my favorite scenes is when he does the penguin story.
Yeah, but here's a joke. It's a political culture joke for Britain, and Brits in our audience, you can back me up on this. I believe I'm going to get it right. Correct me if I'm wrong. That whenever referring to Princess Margaret, Elizabeth's younger sister, you notice in the movie she was always obsessed with the horses, the horses. That's a real life thing. There was a joke once said around the British court of last century that Margaret only cares about if it has 4 legs and a snout. She doesn't care about all she cares about are her horses.
In a creepy way, or like she's so innocent kind of way.
Equestrian, and there might have been some other stuff in there. I don't want to go that far, but she was obsessed with horses in her lifetime. And I believe the movie's giving that little bit of a humorous thing there, that the child cares about the inanimate horses so much, speaking to her future obsession with equestrian activities. So I appreciate that, but that's just my rando knowledge of shit that I know, giving me a little extra, because I will admit I smiled and laughed a few times in the movie. There's some of these moments made me laugh, good humor. But back to where I wanted to go with this before I got sidetracked there. The relationship between Bertie and his family is great, and I liked seeing that. And then you transfer that, but despite him having a good relationship with his family, he has no friends. He says, I have no friends. And the fact that the burgeoning realization that Lionel is his friend, and Lionel has an actual emotional investment of him, because when Lionel reveals that he was there at Wembley when he gave the first failed speech at the beginning of the movie, and he said, I saw somebody that needed help and had the potential to be somebody great if he could just find his voice. And you realize that Lionel was always on his side and didn't want to do it for clout or anything like that. He did it because it was the right thing to do, and because he emotionally wanted to help. And at that revelation of it's what a friend does. Well, I wouldn't know that. I don't have friends. I don't have many friends or any at all. That it's stuff like that, great writing like that, great performances that endears me to a movie and endears me to a scene. And that's where outside my historical preferences, where I want to see a movie refocus, where I find enjoyment when you get interactions like that, and then watching them grow together. Especially back to the scene where they're visiting Lionel's home, and I took very clean notice of when Myrtle, Lionel's wife, comes home early, and she's dealing with Helena Bonham with Elizabeth in the foyer. Uh, Lionel's freaking out because he doesn't know how to handle this, and Bertie, the stammer vanishes completely as he shifts into a supporting role. Well, damn it, man. Just get out there. Don't be afraid. Don't be a coward. He's speaking so cleanly, so easily, no nothing. And right there is the friendship encapsulated. And that's one of my favorite scenes. It happens to be just because I love his behavior of all the titles, all the station vanishes, and it's just a bro telling a bro, dude, just man up, get out there. Damn it, man, get out there. And that
Got out of his head. His
Yeah.
desire to be there for his friend, be supportive, got him out of his head, because at the end of it, it is all psychological. It is a psychosomatic stammer.
Yep. And so you want to add anything on the relationship stuff?
Well, there's just so many moments of that where the friendship is clear. I love near the end of the film where his Lionel's credentials are thrown into questions by the Archbishop's investigation. They're trying to figure out what he could possibly gain. Like the King George is just spitballing, and they can't come up with any legitimate thing that he gains from conning the King of England. Like there's nothing that they come up with, and at the end of the day, they just have to accept. He really is just doing this because he cares. And that's one of my favorite scenes of the movie as well, is in the Westminster Abbey right before the coronation when King George confronts Lionel, and Lionel just has to say, hey, yeah, my credentials aren't true. I never lied to you, but this isn't something that I intended to be. I was just trying to be an actor, and my way with words was beneficial to men with
I
shell
saw
shock.
men in pain. And I just wanted to help. And that scene is fascinating. So let's shift to the final act, which to me is the best part of the movie. The third act, where war is upon us. And we are now at the other half of the meaning of this title, the King's Speech. It is fascinating how in that moment, it seems as though Bertie is trying to sever the relationship at that moment. He's trying to find an excuse to jettison Lionel. Why do you think? I'm having a little bit of trouble trying to think. Why is he why in that moment does he think, "Oh, I'm going to cut ties with this right there"? Do you have a thought on that?
Well, something you see in psychology is self-destructive behavior when you feel like you don't deserve something. So there's this whole trope, in movies do this very commonly, is you're trying to push someone where you care so that they can't betray you. So he's just his whole life, like you said, never had any friends. Now he's getting a chance to have a friend, and he's like,
now
wait,
I see it
is it real, or is he going to betray me? Well, if there's even a chance he's going to betray me, I got to cut this off now so I don't get personally attached, so he can't do that to me. It's a self-defense mechanism that's ultimately self-destructive.
That is perfect. That is the answer I was looking for, because I was trying to figure out why is he trying to sabotage this in this moment, and that's a perfect answer. It's a defense mechanism. He has had pain, betrayal every time somebody got close to him or somebody he thought was going to be close to, except for his wife. And now he is trying to get away from it, when reality that this is the truest bit of friendship you're ever going to have. And Lionel, in that great moment, says, "I'm not going to bullshit you, and I'm not going to let you bullshit you. We can do this." And when he turns around and he's sitting on the throne,
it's such a great moment.
And I know
Bertie doesn't know what to do.
And I love it because, of course, now understanding Lionel at this point and watching the movie enough, he understands, okay, he's just trying to get him so angry that the emotion pushes aside all the bullshit and they can have a real conversation. And it's a brilliant move, and it performed, as I've said over and over again, perfectly. Physical performance, emoting, dialogue, pronunciation, diction, and I say that, and again, knowing what we're talking about here, it's meaningful. Every little bit is meaningful, and it all lands. And that's just the coronation speech. But now we get to the actual war speech, which they clocked in. I think. Wait, was the coronation speech that clocked in at 9 minutes, or the war speech that clocked in at 9 minutes?
So the coronation speech, he had 4 lines, so that didn't clock that. But I thought they said
Okay.
7 minutes when they handed him
Okay.
the sheets of paper. It's like, hey, we clocked this in
Yeah.
at 7 minutes, but of course,
Yeah.
because of the stammer, it was
Now
a
we
little
got,
bit longer.
and he's got 40 minutes to get it done, to get them
Mhm.
ready. And that whole part right there, it's that final bit, the last 20, 30 minutes is a culmination of everything in the movie, of every single coping mechanism that they have built into how he deals with the stammer. Every exercise, every little thing, singing, cursing, dancing, moving, rhythm. It's all right there. And they get into that get into the final little booth. And I really loved it how he just turned it open the window, because it's
Because
like,
that's what he'd be doing every time in his office.
consistency. And I love consistency in a movie. I love it when they make sure to remember, yes, this is a part of this whole dynamic. Open
Mhm.
windows for opening his mind and opening his voice, opening his throat.
Well,
It is
it's more
important.
than that. There is
Yeah.
a physical benefit to having
Yeah.
the cold air, the air in there,
Well, that
just the
too. Yeah.
airflow. But my favorite part of that, just like you're saying, is how he made sure that it was an intimate scenario. When his dad's done the speeches in the past, he did it at his desk. Everyone's around him. So overwhelming for him
Mhm.
because he'd be self-conscious, and that just makes his stammer worse. And some of the things he has to do to cope, or to his little exercises, like you say, in the middle of the speech, would be seen as kind of embarrassing. So he just wanted
Mhm.
to make sure no one else was there, so he didn't have to think about anyone besides Lionel being there to
And
support him.
they turned off the radio on air light. It's just
Mhm.
Lionel there. And this is where we come back to the very fascinating and interesting cinematography choices of the first person perspectives, switching back and forth between them while he's giving the speech. The microphone always in between them. Lionel conducting it, making
Mhm.
sure he feels it. The preparation of deal with it, like drop this vowel, or lean
Jump up
into
to the
this word.
P, the up
Yeah, yeah.
equals.
And uh, I, and I do want to. I'll come back to. I was jumped to a point I should have jumped to earlier, but I'll come back to it after this. And I wonder. I wonder. I guess it's. I guess I could tie it in. Of course, it's always classic then to cut out to watch the rest of the world listening to the
Mhm.
speech. And I wonder, and maybe you can answer this, maybe you can. It sounded like they didn't, but did they cut to the actual speech audio at all during the delivery?
I don't know. I've never heard the original speech, so I couldn't tell you,
Neither
but
have
they
I.
could have.
So yeah,
He was doing such a good job with his
yeah.
stammer. I'm sure he researched and tried to make himself sound just like King George VI. So it wouldn't surprise me if they
Because
fiddled with it a little.
after the coronation speech, when they were watching it in their private viewing
That was
room,
the real
that
footage.
was real footage. That was real footage, and they cut to real news footage of the
Mhm.
time with Germany and all that stuff. And so that made me wonder: Are we, when we got to the speech, is that always Colin Firth, or did they splice in a little bit of Edward? I'm sorry, George VI.
Mhm.
So it's just curiosity. Maybe somebody can educate us either in the chat today or the comments after the stream. Just curious, because if they did, it was seamless, and if they didn't, that's fine, because that's still just Colin Firth banging
Doing a
out a
great
great
job.
performance,
Mhm.
and everybody watching it and watching the reaction of the population, because this is something they needed. Back to the whole idea of the nobility, the royal family. It's part of the DNA of the country, of the kingdom, of the empire. And it's a matter of faith. And I'm not just talking about the religious aspect. Knowing that these individuals are there provides structure
Mhm.
at that time, definitely at that time, for a population who in the coming years are going to see their cities devastated. London is going to be blitzed, literally pummeled with bombs. And I know it's foreshadowing, but and in the movie they don't know it, but they're foreshadowing it when they say it. When Birdie says to Lionel, "I have a feeling I'm going to have to be doing a lot of these speeches over the next few years," and we learn in the credits Lionel was with him for every single one, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful to watch friendship that is just friendship. It's not anything else. Not any of the rando, disgusting shit that modern day Hollywood needs to inject into everything we do. And you all know what I'm talking about. It's beautiful to see a true friendship as it happened, because this was real. And that's why period pieces like this, most of the time I enjoy period pieces that involve fictional characters, because you have a little more room to interact with the history. You can do more. You're not locked in. But this is actual real. These are real people. They really existed. There's their real problems, their real issues, their real relationships. And that's the interesting part of it, when they try to adhere to it as close as they possibly can. Of course, there was dramatization in this movie. Of course there was. We're not so silly and stupid to realize, oh man, this is how they all acted in real life. No, of course we understand.
It's nearly impossible to have 100% adaptation of history, or
because none of us were there. We're going on accountings, secondhand knowledge,
and the royal family is notoriously private. Yeah, so there's plenty of things that we just don't have access to. I'm sure we can do some interviews, but as you saw, a lot of people were already dead by the time the movie was being made.
Well, yeah, but I'm sure there were diaries. There were
they had things to build the idea.
There was stuff.
They could never be perfect.
No, but they do a good enough job where it's believable. Where it's all believable that this is how these people acted. This is how they behaved. I'm sure there was enough information on Lionel Logue to build to build a character for Jeffrey Rush to inhabit, and there is enough information on George VI to build for Colin Firth to build upon a character. There's enough for all of them, enough public appearances, because that was one of the most interesting facts when the movie starts. They hate the fact that now we're in the public. Radio, television, it's a thing, it's growing, it's going to be here forever. There's no escaping it. George V says we can't just parade around in uniform, do a couple salutes, and go hide behind a wall anymore. We have to interact. And it's important to understand that was a turning point in society, in British society, in society all around the world. I mean, here in America, yeah, great. Presidents talking on radio. I mean, during that period of time, Roosevelt's fireside chats, that was important to Americans during World War II, the fireside chats. It's a certain understanding of how all these things work that makes it fascinating to watch it play out. And as I said, I enjoyed the most when it's at these massive fulcrum points of historical significance. And that's why when World War II begins, I'm thinking, okay, I would want to see more of the World War II stuff. But I realized the speech happened, end of the movie. We're not going to go forward. And a great place to stop. It doesn't need to keep going. And I like the credits where it says, and he was given a special societal knighting that very few get, only when they deliver direct help to the royal family. And it's nice to see that. Also knowing that George VI didn't live much longer past World War II, because Elizabeth was crowned at 18, and she's
55,
somewhere around that. Yeah, I'm not. I forgot to go look.
And I know that because of Doctor Who.
Yeah, so she's already like 9-10 when this movie's going on. So in another 8 years or so, she's gonna be crowned queen. He's not. He did not reign for long, and but it's fascinating. I appreciate all these things about this movie, as I've said. So unless you have anything else to add, Jed, let's give the scores.
Okay. Well, one little Easter egg that I wanted to point out, well, not Easter egg, but kind of an interesting connection to this show, is the actor who played the Scarlet Pimpernel a month or two ago was actually in this film as well. He played the first Prime Minister in the film. The one who resigned.
The dude looked familiar. I couldn't quite place it.
It was the Scarlet Pimpernel.
I feel like I know this dude.
I think it's Andrews. It's something weird like that.
Okay, sorry. Okay, all right. Hey, great catch on that. I felt familiar.
Oh, it was bothering me. I had to go look it up.
Yeah. So great. All right, good catch on that. All right, so it's your week, so you get to score it first.
Okay, perfect. Well, as I've mentioned many times, I do adore this film. I'm a sucker for well-written character studies. Character studies are some of my favorites. So I do have to say there might be some bias in this scoring system. I do believe it's an immaculate movie, but I have to point out I do have a bias that I don't know if I'm fully overcoming. So a little disclaimer there. But I think the script is near perfect. The acting is just immaculate. The biggest criticism is the one that Adam brought up. Is it is a little bit longer than it needs to be, but that's such a minor one that it doesn't take away much from this film. So just between everything, the cinematography, even the music, where it's not necessarily adding to the scene, it's exactly what the scene's needed. There's not a single aspect of this film that I didn't think people brought their A game to. So I'd have to give this film a 9 out of 10.
Okay. All right. 9 out of 10. Wow. You actually you scored higher than I did. That's a rarity. And Legatus pointed out here that I'm sorry, I said 18. Looks like she was crowned at 25. Thank you, Legatus. That's why I thought I felt like it was a little off there when you said 50. It's like, wait, no, there's no way she was 18 in the 50s. She had to be older. So thank you for the correction there. Legatus will always catch me when I screw up. It's his job. Anyway, I'm in agreement with you. I thought it was a phenomenal casting job, phenomenal performances, great job. But the biggest problem for me is the fact that it draws on a little bit too much here and there. It's not one specific spot; it's a little too long. There could have been some cuts to the interpersonal stuff because we had enough of it at certain points. We didn't need more of it. And we know my subjectivity always does leak in a little bit to my scores. So I don't feel bad saying I'm giving it an 8.5 out of 10 because it's a solid movie. There is nothing wrong with it. It's historical accuracy and it's a portrayal of the time. And my subjectivity leans into the fact that I want to see stuff going on when the real history is happening, when World War II is going on. But that's not the movie. That is the movie. The movie is about these two men and their friendship and overcoming all these things to help both Birdie and Lionel. Lionel has his own things that kind of goes on, realizing that his place in life is a good place to be. He has a good wife. He has a family. And he was able to connect to this man of larger stature, despite the fact being an Australian commoner. Anyway, so I do recommend this movie to watch it at least once. It is a delightful movie. Delightful movie. All right, Jed, I have chosen next week's movie.
Ooh, what are we looking at?
I was when we were watching it was this movie influenced it. This movie influenced it. They talked about Shakespeare a lot in this movie. So I think it's time for us to do a Shakespeare adaptation.
Please be one of the good ones.
10 Things I Hate About You, adapting Taming of the Shrew. You look disappointed.
I was hoping you were going to pull some Kenneth Branagh now.
No, that's like I'm not talking straight up. I'm not talking straight up. I'm talking side adaptation. Dude, listen, I would love to do Branagh's 4-hour Hamlet, but we can't do that.
His 4-hour I prefer Henry V and Much Ado About Nothing.
Yeah. See,
I love his versions.
When I'm talking like the side, not direct, something that's based upon it. And 10 Things I Hate About You.
The DiCaprio, Romeo and Juliet.
Fuck that. I will never.
That's what I was really worried about. I haven't seen 10 Things I Hate About You, so I don't know one way or another. But
okay, well, it's Heath Ledger, and a couple other familiars in there. I've always enjoyed it because I feel it's a good modern take on Taming of the Shrew, as opposed to what's the one with it was a more classic one where they're doing it's with he was in Seven Brides, Seven Brothers. Shit, forgot his name suddenly.
Richard Burton?
No.
I just see it in the chat. They're talking about one from 1967.
No. I'm talking about the one with the. Hang on. God damn it! Hang on.
We got to do Seven Brides for Seven Brothers at some point.
Right. Yeah. I just want to get the name right. That's all. I just want to get the name right. Yeah, Howard Keel and Kiss Me Kate. Howard Keel, Kiss Me Kate. That's an adaptation, Taming of the Shrew, where they're actually putting on the play of Taming of the Shrew. That's a glorious classic, but I want to do something more modern today. So I always enjoy 10 Things I Hate About You because it hits all the right points for me. Now, this will be one of those times where Jed's going to go F you for making me watch this. So this is a gamble this week, guys. It's a gamble for next week. We'll see. I'm hoping you'll like it because you like Shakespeare. And I'm hoping you'll
Mhm.
appreciate that. They hit all the proper Shakespearean points with the modern twist. And I always enjoy it. It's one of those movies I could put on and just have on as company. It's that kind of movie for me. Anyway, all right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this week. We hope you had a good time. And if you did, hit that like button, subscribe to the channels, and we'll see. Oops, hang on. There we go. We'll see you next week. Until then, guys, take it easy. Have a good night or day wherever you may be.